This movie is still part of the Sword Art Online universe series. We recommend watching the discussion series of Season 1 and Season 2 first, so you can understand the following movie. This movie is set in 2026, when a technology company develops a new virtual reality interface called Augma. Augma is thought to be a modification and development of a previous VR device called Amusphere. However, unlike the Amusphere, which transfers every player's consciousness into the virtual world, in this tool, the player's awareness can still appear in the real world. When players use the Amusphere, they have to do this dive while asleep or sitting without being able to do any activities because their consciousness has completely shifted to the game world. As for this tool called Augma, each player can not only control the character with their consciousness, but also by using physical movements in the real world. That means, when players play or fight in the game world, their physical in the real world must also move to control their character in the game world. Thus, each player will experience a much more realistic experience when using the Augma tool. This is also what makes many people interested in using it, because they also have the opportunity to exercise while playing virtual games. In addition to providing a more realistic gaming experience, Augma can also be used for communication and multimedia activities, such as smartphones, sending short messages, watching streaming videos, and playing social media. The company that launched the Augma tool has also developed a new MMORPG game called Ordinal Scale, which has almost the same characteristics as the Sword Art Online game. However, the interesting thing about the Ordinal Scale game is that the winning points that players get from the game can be exchanged for various shopping vouchers, and can also be exchanged for buying electronic devices. And one other interesting thing about this game is the appearance of an NPC in the form of a beautiful girl named Yuna. From time to time, Yuna would sing and perform concerts in the Ordinal Scale to entertain the players. While everyone was enthusiastic about the Ordinal Scale, Kirito wasn't interested in the game at all. This is because in the Ordinal Scale game, each player is also required to have high agility in the real world to win every battle. So far, Kirito is used to virtual games that only rely on intelligence and awareness, so he is less familiar with the game which relies more on physical superiority. Kirito had tried to play the Ordinal Scale game several times, but after several battles, he immediately felt exhausted. However, unlike him, Asuna and Kirito's other friends really enjoyed the Ordinal Scale game. What's more, Asuna, Lisbeth, and the others had dived into the game using the Augma tool, so that their gaming experience was much more realistic. A few weeks after the game Ordinal Scale was released, the game's servers held a special event that would excite former SAO players. In the latest event, all floor boss monsters from the SAO game will reappear in the Ordinal Scale game, starting from the first floor boss monsters to the 100th floor. After learning about the event, Kirito, who was initially not interested in the Ordinal Scale game, became curious about it. Kirito and Asuna also tried to log into the game to check if the special event really existed. After they entered the game world, they again witnessed the 10th floor boss monster that they had defeated together. That means, the special event about the appearance of the floor boss from the SAO game in the Ordinal Scale game was real. Kirito, Asuna, and the other players tried to defeat the 10th floor boss monster together. In the SAO game, Kirito can defeat every boss monster from various floors with ease, but in the Ordinal Scale game, which relies on physical agility, the situation is a bit different for him. He seemed to have a hard time getting close to the floor boss monster, while Asuna and Klein could only make a few light attacks that had no effect on the monster. Not long after several players decided to escape from the battle arena, a top male player named AG appeared. He is one of the strongest players in the Ordinal Scale game, and he has even taken second place on the leaderboard of strongest players. With the cooperation between AG and Asuna, the two of them finally defeated the boss monster quickly. A few nights later, the Ordinal Scale server brought another floor boss monster back into the game. That means the floor boss monsters will appear gradually, where every week a new floor boss will be added. Asuna, who was enthusiastic about the appearance of the floor boss monster, immediately rushed to where the floor boss was without telling Kirito. Several Ordinal Scale players who were former SAO game players also gathered at the floor boss location to defeat the monster. While all the players were struggling to defeat the floor boss monster, AG suddenly attacked Klein from behind, causing him to fracture his right arm. After that, AG brought Klein, who was seriously injured, in front of the boss monster, so that in a short time, Klein's game character was killed. Surprisingly, even though Klein's real body was not killed, he suddenly felt such an excruciating headache that all of Klein's memories of the SAO game disappeared. The same thing was experienced by other former SAO game players who were killed in the Ordinal Scale game. They felt a headache in the head and all their memories of the SAO game also disappeared. Another oddity that occurred in the game was the situation where all the players who experienced this phenomenon were former SAO game players. Meanwhile, players who had never played SAO did not experience the phenomenon of pain or memory loss at all. It turns out that the strange phenomenon was deliberately designed by someone who had created the Augma technology. He is a male professor named Shigemura Tetsuhiro, who is none other than the father of a female former player in the SAO game named Yuna. Yuna used to be one of the players in the SAO game who used to play music in the game, but unfortunately, she was killed by an attack of a floor boss monster. This can happen because in the past, there was a terrible phenomenon in the SAO game where all players who were killed in the SAO game world were also killed in the real world. Professor Shigemura couldn't accept the fact that Yuna had died. Therefore, the professor developed a tool called Augma and copied the entire SAO game database to modify it into a new game called Ordinal Scale. Using the game, Professor Shigemura wanted to collect all the memories about Yuna from all former SAO players who had met her. With a collection of data from these memories, he will try to revive Yuna in the virtual world, or even into an artificial human form in the real world. The method used to collect all the memories is by forcibly scanning the player's brain through the Augma tool they use. When former SAO players are feeling scared when dealing with floor boss monsters, Augma will detect the player's memories of the events when they were in the SAO game, so Augma will immediately steal all those memories. Although most people think that Augma is a safe VR tool, it is actually a further development of the NerveGear tool, a tool that functions to connect the player's brain to the game network. That is why Augma has the ability to scan the player's brain and can even retrieve a lot of information. The NerveGear tool has actually long been abandoned by many players because it can create electromagnetic waves large enough in the user's brain to cause the user to lose memory or die in the real world. That's the danger that a former SAO player might experience who logs in using Augma and becomes the target of Professor Shigemura's evil plan. To carry out the plan, Professor Shigemura teamed up with AG, who had been close to Yuna while in the SAO game. AG is in charge of fishing and catching former SAO players who are fighting against floor boss monsters in the game Ordinal Scale. That's answered the reason why AG had purposely broken Klane's arm bone and handed him over to the floor boss monster to kill. Apart from Klane, the other former SAO players who had died in the game while fighting the floor boss monsters were also slowly losing their memories. The same thing happened to Asuna after she died because she sacrificed herself to protect Silica. Kirito, who saw what happened, was very worried about her and began to wonder what exactly had happened. This was because all the memories that made Asuna fall in love with him were their memories when they were in the SAO game. He was afraid that if she lost all that memories, then she would also forget him and begin to forget her feelings for Kirito. To unravel the mystery of what had happened to Asuna and the other former SAO players, Kirito tried to log into the game Ordinal Scale. In the middle of the investigation, Kirito meets Yuna's spirit, or rather, a collection of memory data about Yuna that is still left in the game. She then explained that the strange phenomenon that occurred in the Ordinal Scale game recently happened because her father wanted to bring her back to life. Therefore, she asked Kirito for help to prevent this because what her father did was very dangerous for all former SAO players in the game. Yuna advises Kirito to increase his level in the game and become stronger so that he doesn't die while fighting the floor boss monsters. That way, his memories of the SAO game wouldn't be easily scanned and stolen by the Ordinal Scale game server. After hearing Yuna's story and knowing that Asuna's condition was getting worse, he was determined to be able to defeat all the floor boss monsters and increase his level. Even Kirito didn't allow other players to kill the floor boss monsters and threatened to kill them if they went against him. A few weeks after defeating many floor boss monsters, Kirito's game level increased dramatically, and he managed to rank 9th on the leaderboard. On another day, an NPC Yuna held a concert by playing a song that the original Yuna had previously played in the SAO game. Many former SAO game players including Asuna, Lisbeth, and Silica attended the concert without realizing that the concert was actually just a trap set up by Professor Shigemura. The professor plans to do a mass scan of all the players at the concert with very high electromagnetic wave, so he can get all of the players' memory data about the SAO game instantly. The spirit of the original Yuna had known about it, so she immediately told Kirito so he could warn all the players at the concert. But when he was about to enter the theater, he was blocked by AG, so Kirito was a little late because he had to fight first. After successfully defeating AG, Kirito immediately entered the auditorium and found that many former SAO players had been hacked by the server. The brains of the hacked players will be forcibly scanned by the Augma device they used to log in. Surprisingly, AG, who had been helping Professor Shigemura, suddenly also experienced the same thing as the other players. That means, Professor Shigemura has betrayed AG and hacked his Augma so that AG's memories of the SAO game are also stolen by the server. Several floor boss monsters were moved into the concert hall and caused terror to all the players in the venue. Seeing that the situation was getting worse, Yuna's spirit then asked Kirito to defeat the 100th floor boss monster, because it was the only way to make all the players in the place log out en masse. After that, Kirito immediately fought against the 100th floor boss monster with all the strength he had, along with several other players who were still surviving. Fortunately, he and the others managed to defeat the 100th floor boss monster so that all players could log out of the Ordinal Scale game, and their memories of the SAO game were also restored. After that incident, Professor Shigemura was arrested by a special investigation team led by Kikuoka, who had been Kirito's partner in investigating the Gun Gale online case. But instead of being imprisoned, Kikuoka hires Professor Shigemura to develop a system called Soul Translator, and a virtual world called Underworld at a technology company called the Wrath Company. The movie ends. The moral that can be learned from this movie is that saving the lives of those we love the most is a good thing, but it cannot be an excuse for someone to sacrifice the lives of many people just to bring back someone they love. After all, the lives of everyone in this world are valuable, no matter whether that person is someone we know or a stranger.